What if your fears are not fully yours? What if the feelings arising within you from anxiety to feeling not good enough are echoes of a story that began long before you? Welcome to the 5th episode of Let's Get Real to Heal. I'm Dr. Joelle Samaha, founder of PhiloLife Wellbeing Education Center, hypnotherapist, PhiloLife coach, adjunct faculty, and researcher in the field of philosophy of health and well-being. Today, our episode is all about generational patterns and how to release them. Stay tuned till the end because we're going to speak about tools and ways to release these patterns. In this episode, we're going to delve into the world of subconscious memories, memories that travel through us. These memories do affect us on an emotional and on a physical level. So my guest today is passionate about generational patterns and family constellation therapy. She's a hypnotherapist. She comes from the business corporate world, but she's definitely fascinated by how generational patterns are released and how big of a difference they make in your life. Let's welcome Arpita. Arpita, it's an honor to have you for different reasons. One, because I enjoy your company, and I was telling you before the podcast that I'm sure we're going to laugh about it, and I'm always a fan of your laughter, of your smile that brings warmth. And I've been into many of your workshops when it comes to family constellations, to energy attunement. And I would say that you always inspire me with that, spark of life you have. I read in your bio like a very interesting sentence, do life. And I think you do life because every time you travel, you come back with lots of stories. And I think through our friendship, I would say I've learned to keep my eyes open to see the miracles that the universe has to offer. And from the pigeons who visit your office to small little details that have made a difference in the way I perceive life. So I think we never meet coincidentally, and you've added a lot to my journey. And today I want to do my best through this podcast to be able to introduce the audience to what generational pattern means. Because when we've opened up about it and started discussing it, and in hypnotherapy, we do past life regression. And yes, I've studied it. But here it's not about past life. It's about the generations. And I think if the first time I've started digging in my family history and trying to understand who passed away first and who had a heavy past, and how could it be that my fears or my worries could be transmitted through generation. This was an eye-opener thing. And today I would say the first thing I would start with is saying that you can't know yourself if you don't know the lineage that makes you who you are today. So from where did this passion come from, and how did you land on that topic to start with?
Thank you, Joelle, first and foremost for your kind words. Really touches my heart, and I'm very honored. And it's an absolute pleasure to be with you here today.
It's my pleasure.
And how I landed on it is completely personal. As you say, I came from the corporate world. I studied economics. I did my MBA. I very happily worked in the corporate sector for more than 15 years. My introduction to this line of work was because of my daughter and her health. I'm a mother of twins, and ever since I gave birth, my daughter had inexplicable lung complications, which could not be dealt with because there was nothing wrong with her lungs. There was medically nothing wrong. The only explanation we had was that her immunity is low. But call it a mother's guilt or that push, because I'm like, I have 2 kids. Touchwood, one is completely healthy and one has these inexplicable issues. Like, we've been to the hospital every 3 months in the first 1 year. Bronchitis, bilateral pneumonia, you just name it and we had it. That kind of opened my eyes to something that is more than what we can logically understand. And I say that with the deepest respect to my doctors, because there was nothing wrong that they were saying. There was nothing physically wrong. It was just my daughter was just attracting some kind of viruses or lack of immunity. That got me into researching, and I did all sorts of researches. I couldn't care less at that time what works or what doesn't. That brought me to hypnotherapy to begin with. I realized, I must say, I have been very fortunate to have amazing therapists and teachers in that phase of my life. My first therapist was a GP, a doctor herself, and I think I chose her because I said, this is going to make logical sense. And it did. She explained to me the mind, the subconscious mind, in a very logical, scientific framework, which I could understand. And I worked on my daughter. Through me, my daughter didn't need to go for any sessions. She was like less than a year old. And lo and behold, she healed.
Amazing.
And that's what opened my eyes. I still had my job, and I said, you know what, I'm going to learn this as a hobby. So I never planned this. I never planned this transition. I kept working, and I started to study clinical hypnotherapy, not to be a professional at that time, just that this could bring so much relief into my system. And as they say, you don't stop at one. It opened my eyes, my heart, my everything so much to this science that I became very passionate, and I studied transpersonal regression therapy, I did metaphor therapy, and finally I did family constellations, which I think ties all of it together, which is our topic today on transgenerational healing. So, yeah, and then I took the leap of faith. I quit my beautiful corporate career.
That's the thing. We always hear these stories when transformation happens. So we drop something to open up to the light of some knowledge coming our way. And that's amazing. In fact, that makes me think back to how I really started learning hypnotherapy, and how impressive the impact was on myself first. Because when we take these workshops and when we take these courses, the work happens on us first.
Correct.
This is where we start realizing that certain patterns we have today are really related to very old patterns that we can't even remember. And the most fascinating about it is some of them start in the womb, just before we are conceived, because whatever the mom is feeling at that time.
Absolutely.
And this is why we keep speaking about the fact that when you want to prepare for having a child, rather than only thinking about what you want to eat, think about your mental state and how to release your patterns, the generational ones and the current ones you're carrying, to be able to, provide the best you can, because we all want to give the best we kind of have for our kids. But starting from the concept of generational patterns, can you explain to the audience what is a generational pattern and how scientifically do you think it is passed on?
Okay, so when we talk of generational patterns, let me explain it from two different angles, one from the regression therapy perspective and one from the constellation perspective. So when we talk of regression means going back, which means imagine from the day Joelle was born till this very moment, your life, your experiences shape you. This is also a part of regression therapy, which means we go back in what we popularly call the inner child work, where anything that has happened to Arpita or to Joelle in this life from my birth till now can have an impact on me. Now let's rewind more, which you're talking about. When you and I were in our mother's womb, at that point of time, it is not that our conscious minds are completely formed. It takes the first 8 years of our lives for our conscious mind to develop, which means in the womb of my mom, when I was conceived till the time I was delivered, so roughly 9 months on an average, is when I start to sense the world around me through her. Hence, in every culture, in every country, in every religion, we say, take care of pregnant women, keep them happy, just not eat healthy, think healthy, listen to nice music, soak in the positivity, because what the mother feels is what the baby feels. Now rewind further. And now we get into the more spiritual side of regression therapy, that what happens before conception. Then comes the question of the generations before. So here is the split. Here we can say that, my soul comes from somewhere. And that goes into the aspect of spiritual hypnosis or spiritual regression therapy. Or very scientifically put, we can say it runs in my DNA. That's the beginning of transgenerational work. So, for example, I give you a very simple example. If in my family there is diabetes as a condition, so we are warned and we are said that, okay, be careful about your lifestyle, what you eat, how you exercise, because my genes, my DNA is predisposed to it.
Correct.
It doesn't mean I will definitely have it.
No.
There are a lot of environmental factors that contribute to it, but the DNA that I carry in every cell of my body has a pre-exposure to it.
Exactly.
Very easy to understand it medically when it happens in the body.
There are a set of predispositions from the lighter one to the more dangerous one. And it can be activated or dormant your whole life.
Absolutely. And we are more in acceptance of what happens in our bodies when it's like, as we say, it comes through the genes. But think of it, anxiety, depression, feelings of fear, like what you were talking about. This could also be that our DNA is pre-exposed to it. It doesn't mean that you and I are going through the same experience, but something really small can trigger that subconscious memory.
Agree. And I think to make a difference or differentiate between generational patterns and what people would call past life. Here we're not talking about reincarnation. We're not going in the religious aspect of it, just to be clear about it. We're talking here about the generations, our ancestors, and maybe something common that has been passed on in their stories. Like I've seen in studies about the Second World War, about that people who have survived these wars have passed on certain fears, whether it is financial fears, financial limitations, or fears from being alone, etc. So what we are talking about is understanding more our ancestors. And sometimes we do relate to one ancestor more than the other. Because we have something similar. And it could be due to carrying more genes from that side of the family. So here it's more about understanding and delving into it to uncover patterns. I've seen in families hypochondria is very common. So then it's not a surprise for the new generation to have that if it is passed on. And I think with time it's going to be proved scientifically that we carry in the DNA much more than we think it carries.
Exactly. As the line between the physics and metaphysics dwindles as science progresses and we are able to put a more scientific explanation to it. How I see it is, I don't say it is that it is passed on. I would rather say we take it from our ancestors. And that's because we love our ancestors. We are extremely loyal to the point of even maybe I destroy myself, because I am so deeply indebted. See, life flows from a higher to a lower level, just like water. So the life I have in me is because of my ancestors, is because of my parents. We say 100% of an egg from my mom and 100% of the sperm from my dad, when comes together, then I am born.
Agree.
And now, how many of our ancestors do we actually know? Parents, grandparents, if we are lucky, probably our great-grandparents. But beyond that, we have no idea. And hence, when you go back again to culture, to religion, to our countries, you'll see every culture has a different way of honoring our ancestors because they are coded in us. And just as we are mothers, we would never pass on anything bad to our kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they don't pass it on. It is us. We are, and in constellation work, we call this term entanglement. We are unconsciously entangled to something that has not been brought into light. Some misfortune. What could this be? Our ancestors' experiences, like you said, war. Yeah, tsunamis, natural disasters, COVID, maybe years down the line. Anything,
or loss of grief, a child, grief.
Murder, suicide, any sort of losses, loss of a child. So in our line of work, miscarriages, abortions, stillborns, all of this matter. And imagine having those imprints in us, and then for whatever reason, if it is triggered or we, out of love and loyalty for them, we kind of, it's like, Mama, you suffered, so I suffer also, just to prove that I belong to you. That is how it is, as we call transfer. I don't say transfer. I said we own it, we take it because
I think it's a natural process.
It's a child's loyalty. And when in therapy, in workshops, we can see that very clearly. We can walk out of it and we can find a different way of honoring our ancestors, not by having the same destiny and the same fate that they had. Instead, saying, you know what, you gave me this life, I'm going to make better use of it. I'm going to make it so beautiful, and that's the way I will honor you.
Honoring them, honoring their life, honoring their journey.
Their sacrifices, whatever they made, so that today I am alive.
Exactly. It's part of gratefulness.
Yes,
it's part of the process of attracting blessings.
Yes.
We don't do it because of wanting to have blessings, but we want to make peace with who we are at the core, sometimes even with forgiveness and compassion. But what I want to ask about today, because in this episode of the podcast as well, which is about let's get real to heal. So my next question would be, how much did you see in your practice of a correlation between generational patterns and health imprints? And could it be that releasing those patterns could really help on a physical level as much as it could help on an emotional level? And for that, what I am trying to even say in a clearer way is the stories we have create our emotions, and ultimately our emotions are affecting our physicality. You know, Arpita, I had it just came to me, a very funny to dramatic experience a few days back. I started a diving course and I went there excited about it. And it was the first class was in the pool. And what happened was really interesting. I had to reflect on it to be able to go back to the class. While I was underwater clearing my mask, the water got stuck in my mask. They are teaching us how to clear the mask, and divers would know that. The regulator was in my mouth, so I was breathing. But when I removed the mask and could not clear the water, I told myself a story that I'm not able to breathe, despite that the regulator is in my mouth. My legs cramped badly. I couldn't move. So the teacher had to take me up to the surface and release the cramps, etc. And I was in a state of panic, and my body was in continuous cramping.
Though you were out of it.
And the coach looked at me and said, "But Joelle, you're breathing. The regulator is in your mouth." And then it took me a second to realize that I created a story that I wasn't able to breathe because my nose was exposed underwater. And what followed was a panic, and what followed was my body cramping.
Correct.
And these were real cramps. I had to leave on that day. I couldn't stay. My whole body was in a flight mode. So this is where I'm saying, when patterns are released, when stories are released, emotions are released, and that would change your physical, would affect positively your physical health. How do you see it in your practice? And
I see it on a daily basis. And for me, this is all interrelated. There is no difference between an emotion being released or something that is physical. It's a 4-step process, actually. It all begins with the thought. So giving your example right now, your thoughts was that your glass is not clean, you're taking it out, and all it did was that your nose is exposed. So my nose is exposed is a thought. But the fact was that you were still breathing.
Yeah, it's a story.
This thought creates an emotion.
Exactly.
Which is the panic. Now, this emotion then impacts our energy levels in the body, which is what would have happened is your body went into a fight and flight.
Yeah.
The cramps are real.
Yeah, and they were real for the whole day.
Whole day, of course, because your body is still releasing.
Yeah.
So in that fraction of a second, what happened was thought created an emotion. Emotion impacted the energy levels in your body, and finally it came down to the physical level.
Yeah.
So the simplest example I can give you in my profession is psychosomatic diseases. Yeah, when there is no such kind of a diagnosis, which is great. We don't want our patients to be diagnosed with something bad, but it is like migraines, fibromyalgia, unexplained pains and aches in the body. There's so many things. IBS, one of the biggest concerns of today's stress. And what causes it? Stress. Now, stress is an ocean. What kind of stress? So when we delve deeper, whether through constellation work or through regression therapy, we are working just not through the mind, but also through the body, because the body is also a reservoir of its memories. And then when we release that, at that instant, we are delinking this thought, emotion, energy, and body process, where now we are creating space so that I can have my own experience in diving. So the next time you go in, it is going to be Joelle who goes in, and there are no background stories that are creating that panic.
Exactly. There are lots of associations involved
Yes.
in a second when you're making decisions or you're
Correct.
feeling certain things. It gets entangled with all the previous experience
That you've had.
But when did you see it prominent when it comes to generational patterns? Like, can you really share an example
I will share my
anonymously?
own example because when I started to work, you look at your family, the first thing that you do. And I come from India, so we haven't been exposed to war, our generation, but my grandparents were, and my great-grandparents were. And they moved from, there's been a lot of migration when India was partitioned. So in my blood, in my DNA, there is displacement and there is war. And I would get very irritable sometimes with my mom because my mom has a habit of hoarding. And if I gift her a perfume today, I bet 10 years down the line, you'll find the perfume in her closet. And I used to get mad, and this used to create a rift between us. And when I studied and understood this, I realized who hoards, who keeps things to themselves are people who went through some kind of a crisis. My mom didn't, but maybe my grandma did and my great-grandma did when they relocated and moved lock, stock and barrel overnight. That's from my own experience, I realized that there was this fear of keep things, save things, don't use it, store it for the future, comes from a generational experience of war, partition, and displacement. The other very beautiful thing I've seen in my practice is unexplained infertility issues.
That's
When
interesting.
couples come and medically there is nothing wrong and it's unexplained why I'm not conceiving. And I will never say that the credit only goes to this, but I have had beautiful stories of people clearing those patterns. And I've worked with both the man and the woman, and they're completely different reasons why probably there is an issue of that we cannot logically say what it is. And unexplained infertility then leads to conception, leads to pregnancy. And I've seen those kids, and I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of my work when you see the next generation is freed from the shackles of what generational trauma the ancestors have been through.
Exactly. That makes me think of us Lebanese, God. We've been like through the war continuously. And I think it really hit me when lately, a few years back, I think during the revolution, my mom had told me like, I think this time it's going to change. And I looked at her and I was like, do you really believe that it's going to change? You're born during the war. You got married during the war. You got us during the war and raised us, and we got our children during the war. So how can you still believe in that? But then it hit me of how much do we carry, because we joke around it as in Lebanese that every Lebanese startle when a door slams. And this is because there is a lot we carry through, not only our experience, it's a generational experience. And this is why, as you say, releasing these patterns could help us be conscious about how our autopilot mode is functioning. I like Carl Jung when he says that as long as the subconscious remains subconscious and you don't bring it up to the conscious,
controls us.
You are being controlled by it, and you call it fate.
It repeats as destiny.
And that's the most beautiful thing. We think it's fate. We think that we fall into the same trap again and again, but these are indications of patterns. So how do you spot a generational pattern?
We don't go looking for a generational pattern. See, when a client shows up and I'm asking all these questions, just not about, say a person comes that I have a fear of water. I'm just not looking at it at a clinical level, but I'm also taking the information about the family, about anything that has happened in the family. So we don't go looking for it in form of a questionnaire or something. What I do is I always believe that when you sit in that chair as my client, I'm also looking at you, but through you, I'm looking at all the stories that lies behind you, which is again in your DNA. And just to make an intent that whatever is relevant for that client will show up. And then there are, again, telltale signs. If there has been, for example, war, displacement, any natural calamities that the family or the generations have faced, we look at who's missing. The bedrock of constellation work is to figure out an exclusion. So is that somebody who died early? Any like untimely deaths of children in the family? Has anybody been thrown out of the family, banished? Is there shame? Do you not talk to one part of the family? We look at those telltale signs, and they show up. Because here we are working on the subconscious. We are not doing counseling. It's counseling, psychotherapy, beautiful modalities. But here we are looking at what has not yet been brought to light, something that has not yet been spoken of.
Yes, that's really beautiful, because at the end, in our daily life, I sometimes observe or hear people around in certain families making these comments, subtle comments, but they are meaningful. You're reminding me of your uncle. You are so much like your dad's family side. That means sometimes it's an indication that I need to look into it to see what have I been carrying, and probably honor it.
Yes.
And I'm saying probably because sometimes I need to acknowledge it first, then I need to honor it. But at the same time, when do you think we are invited to release these patterns? Does it have to reach a point of medical illness to go and search and find out how that emotional entanglement had led to physical ailment or disease?
No, I think it's the physical manifestation is the last stage. And
That's
if you
what we
ask
need to
me,
say. Repeat it. Oh gosh, this is beautiful.
it is like the body speaks and slaps us in a way that we can't
100
ignore.
times before coming up.
But it shouldn't go to that. If you ask me, probably it will happen in the future, that this whole concept of well-being in general should, I believe, become a part of curriculum. We should not be in our 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s hitting a health crisis and then realizing, oh my God, this has happened in my lineage.
That's why the insurance policy we're buying is not a preventive policy. This is only a way of managing when a disease hit or when something comes up.
For it's like, like how we treat our cars, right? We if something goes wrong, we go to the garage. But you also send your car for your 3 months or whatever time you go for maintenance. So no, this shouldn't come. If you ask me, it shouldn't come to the level of health, because that's the last warning we are getting. It should be much, much before. And hence the topic of mental and physical health going hand in hand, that if we are open to having these conversations, if we are open to embracing, and the best way to get out of this transgenerational traumas is to separate the stories and narratives we hear as kids sometimes to the truth. And sometimes the truth is not even there. Like we don't even know what to believe and what not. Hence, in constellation work, we work on certain principles. The first principle is we all belong. Nobody belongs less. Even if there is an aborted child in the family, if there's a miscarriage, we still count that soul, that child, as part of being whole. Then we look at, hierarchy, very important in constellation work. And hierarchy is only time related. So my parents are bigger than me, and my grandparents are even bigger than them. And in front of them, I am a small little child. My kids are smaller than me. So I receive from them and I give to my kids. And then the third principle is about balance. It's a give and take. So I give you a little, you give me a little more. When these three principles are in harmony, we should ideally live a very happy, healthy, harmonious life. It should not go to that level of health crisis. So no, if you ask me, it should be identified and dealt with at a much earlier stage. And then we prevent all these percolating down to the level of the body.
In fact, that's how it should be. When we get the signs of being unhappy for a very long time, and when we feel one dominant, I would say, negative emotion sitting in us and becoming a way for us to grieve continuously, this is where we need to take action much before
it may be that grief, that wall of grief, 20% is my own experiences. But if it is overwhelming, so how to spot it is that you can't get out of it. No matter what you do, it keeps coming back. Then that's when we start to question that how much of it is my own experience and how much of it is I'm carrying on behalf of someone. That's the life-changing question, to see where so we send it back. We don't mean to send back negativity or a bad thing. We say, I take what belongs to me, the rest I release wherever
And
it
sometimes
belongs.
the limitation is what I'm feeling towards things that have happened, and that cannot explain with its intensity
Yes.
the small incident that I survived or I
Yes.
overcome. So, and on this, I think Dr. Gabor Mate has a saying where he says, trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside of you when these things happens to you.
Exactly.
So a small thing as simple as being embarrassed in a classroom that could be something we laugh about,
Yeah.
but keeps coming back to a person again and
Exactly.
again, or to a child or a teenager, is a traumatic event. There is no definition by intensity. So some people do not address the real patterns just because they think that that was a childhood thing. And I do
Correct.
understand it. But what I understand today is not what the child has understood
At that
back
time,
in time.
100%. So when we talk of these, taking your example of fears or say embarrassment of say public speaking, a lot of people come for therapy that I know my stuff, but when it comes to making a presentation, I freeze, or I can't do it.
Yeah.
Now, if we can trace back clinically to a point in their life where they were embarrassed in class, this again falls in the category of our inner child work, where that child did not have the resources at that point of time to deal with that, what happened. However, many times you will not find any instance in your entire lifetime that you can logically say, I have this problem because of that. Then where does it come from? That opens the door to transgenerational healing, which means who in my lineage faced same embarrassment, was belittled, and when somebody came out to speak in public, something bad happened. So that's the difference between my life's experiences to what I do not care. I cannot put a logical finger on it and say this is where it comes from.
It's a philosophy of health. That's where we go back to the way of thinking about it, to the philosophy behind it.
Yes.
That the way you approach it, how you question what is going on with you, how much you have time to stop and reflect and search for answers. And most of the time, there are limitations for our conscious mind. Otherwise, we would be able to achieve whatever we want. So this is why we need a specialist or a therapist to kind of sit and, hear our story. And together we can unfold the patterns. And I would say, speaking about releasing patterns, because it's a huge expression.
Yeah.
You can't release it manually, of course. And it doesn't involve any touch. But when we speak about it, because last episode we spoke with Dr. Jamila about how we could release from the pelvis certain traumas. But what we're speaking about today with transgenerational therapy and family constellation has nothing to do with the physicality. So how releasing is possible, and how does forgiveness play a role in the...
Yeah, so releasing is possible in so many ways. So when I work with regression therapy, we also use touch points in the body which can release. But yeah, a big chunk of the work is without touch, and that's how you can even sometimes do it online nowadays. So how does this work? In a constellation kind of a setup, what happens is it becomes very visual. The story kind of unfolds in front of you. Now, as a client, you may or may not understand it sometimes. Maybe there is a complete disconnect, or maybe there's an inner fear or resistance. I wouldn't call it even resistance. It's just that, oh my God, this has happened. But as we say, what you see once remains seen. So if I tell you, Joelle, don't think of a blue elephant right now, the first thing you will think is a blue elephant. Exactly. So when it becomes very visual, we are not working at the level of the conscious mind. Conscious mind is roughly 5%. 95 is subconscious. This image of the constellation sits in your subconscious mind. And hence we say after a session of constellation or a workshop, please don't rush into another modality immediately, because you need some time for the energies to settle.
And to process. Most of the times these are intense
take time
sessions.
Because this is happening in every cell of your body. We need to give it some time.
And it's something that has been snowballing in the back of your head for years.
It's like, think of it like if there's a bathtub full of water and you have a football on top of it. Yeah. Ideally, the football should be floating. But what we do out of our own pain or our loyalty or love, we are trying to push that ball down. Imagine the amount of effort you're taking to push that thing down underwater. Slowly your hand will start to pain. That's the amount of energy that becomes available to us once we see what has happened. So we don't so much care about the conscious, but for the subconscious mind, here is a huge relief that, okay, this has happened, or this is my story of my ancestors. Now, thank you for bringing up the word forgiveness, and because this is very, very important in my line of work and what I truly believe. I'm a little allergic to the word forgiveness because, it's interpreted in so many ways.
Yeah, and many people are allergic to it, believe me.
Because, there's nothing wrong with forgiveness. Don't get me wrong. I prefer to use the word acceptance. Because sometimes in whatever connotation we use, when I say I forgive you, I am unconsciously taking a higher position than you. I'm saying, I know better, I deal with it better, I have better exposure, whatever. My ego comes into play and I downplay the person in front. This doesn't work long term, because tomorrow morning I'm going to be super agitated about it, because forgiveness doesn't work like this. In constellation work, we say yes to what has happened. We say we are in acceptance of what has happened in the past. We may not be in acceptance of what has happened in the sense of if there's wrongdoing, if there is murder, if there is war, if there is loss. But we are still in acceptance of the fact of what has happened. Because unless you accept something is wrong, you can't change it. So if my stomach is paining and I say it's not paining, I'm not going to go and get it checked and get myself into wholesomeness again. The moment I say something is wrong, I need to go checked is what I'm calling as acceptance. And in our line of work, there is no forgiving parents. There is no forgiving people who are older. This backfires. We become bigger than them. We can say we are in acceptance of what has happened, and I don't accept bad behavior.
Plus, we know that everybody does the best they can at a certain point of time with the knowledge they have. So it's not about criticizing anyone or judging anyone. It's about, as you say, accepting that certain things were hard, that certain experience...
Accepting the human experience, that even our parents, our ancestors, and we're human, and there is so much that has happened, and we are nobody to judge anyone. If you tell me, that is real forgiveness, that is real acceptance, because there are always two sides of the story. And when we integrate it, then that's when you're releasing it.
Exactly. Plus, when we said allergic to forgiveness, because certain people don't find it easy to forgive, versus other personalities find it super easy to forgive. Okay. But here it's not about your ability to forgive. It's about your ability to accept and let go so that you can live a healthier and happier life.
Forgiveness, if we really have to use the word, is only for yourself.
Yeah.
It's not for anyone else. So if I choose to accept and I choose to forgive, it's a very selfish, it's a very beautiful act that I do it for my own release so I can create space for my experiences.
Thank you, Arpita, for the experience shared and the knowledge and the personal information you put on the table. Any last message you would like to pass on to the audience before we wrap up?
I would say that, it's been wonderful that the whole space of mental health has opened up so much in the last few years. And I believe there is no right time for it. So there is nothing like I have to be at a certain age to do this or not. There are so many avenues, there's so many ways to address it. The only message is to be hopeful. I'm an eternally hopeful person, very optimistic, and I believe if the mind decides and the soul decides, every barrier can be conquered. So just the openness for our audiences to reach out to anybody they feel. It could be a healer, a doctor, a therapist, doesn't matter. But yeah, healing is everybody's birthright. That's what I would leave with.
Healing is everybody's birthright. And I would say exploring who you are is a choice and a responsibility if you choose to live happily and if you choose to live in a healthy way. So for this today, I would ask you to keep supporting us, support this platform. I'm continuously trying to bring in different holistic modalities. It's not one modality that could be the answer, but combining a few in a holistic approach and trying to build on that to boost your immunity, to boost your health and your well-being would be an ideal choice, looking at how much chaos we have around us, and the lack of time we have to reflect inwardly. So please do follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, and the episode will be available on Spotify as well. Leave your comments. If you have experienced any release of a transgenerational pattern and that has changed your life, please do share. This could change somebody else's life. So let's get real to heal.